Where it all begins sometimes, the most powerful stories don't begin in boardrooms or courtrooms. They start on sidewalks. This is a story about a little black girl, a paper sign, and a pitcher of lemonade. It's about what happens when innocence meets injustice, and how a single act of small-minded cruelty can spark a nationwide movement. But more than anything, this is a story about resilience, power, and legacy, poured into every drop of lemonade by a girl who refused to be silenced. As you follow the journey of Aaliyah Monroe, remember this: her story doesn't start at fame, success, or ownership. It begins on a quiet corner beneath an old oak tree with a dream too bold to be boxed in. And it begins right here, a little stand with a big dream. The summer sun cast a golden glow over the sidewalks of East Maple Lane, a sleepy corner of Atlanta where days moved slowly and dreams often stayed tucked away behind closed doors. But on that particular Friday, something unusual broke the monotony: a small plastic table set beneath an old oak tree with a handmade sign that read, "Fresh Lemonade 25," in shaky, colorful handwriting. Behind the table stood Aaliyah Monroe, all of 9 years old, her 2 pigtails bouncing as she poured lemonade into Dixie cups with care. Her smile was contagious, even if her stand looked modest. Just a folding chair, a cooler filled with ice, and a pitcher full of sunshine and ambition. But this wasn't just about pocket money or a summer pastime. Aaliyah had a mission. Inside the small apartment she shared with her mom, Tasha, the air always smelled like vanilla and cinnamon. Tasha, a talented baker with dreams of opening her own cafe, had recipes passed down from generations but no capital to start a business. Rent, bills, groceries, it all added up. There was never enough left over to invest in dreams. So Aaliyah took matters into her own tiny hands. "I'm gonna help Mommy," she whispered to herself the night before she opened her stand, counting the coins she had saved from birthdays and spare change. She stayed up past bedtime squeezing lemons, mixing sugar water, even cutting mint leaves from the neighbor's bush with permission. Her stand might have been small, but her dream was anything but, and people noticed. By noon, joggers, dog walkers, and mail carriers had stopped by. Her lemonade was refreshing, and her charm even more so. Some paid $1 instead of a quarter. Aaliyah kept a notebook to track every sale, proud of every drop that brought her mom one step closer to owning that bakery. But across the street, behind white curtains and judgmental eyes, someone else was watching, and not with kindness. The coal that sparked a storm inside the pristine home across from Aaliyah's lemonade stand. Karen Whitmore peered through her bay window like a hawk, surveying its prey. Her manicured fingers clutched a glass of iced tea as she muttered to herself, "Not in my neighborhood." To Karen, rules were sacred. The HOA bylaws were her Bible. She'd reported teenagers for skateboarding, left notes about mismatched mailboxes, and once chased a stray cat off her lawn with a broom. But today, her focus was on one little black girl and her lemonade stand. "She doesn't have a permit," Karen hissed under her breath. "She's probably not even being supervised." Her irritation grew with every smiling customer Aaliyah served. That sense of control, the illusion of order she clung to, was slipping. And Karen wouldn't have it. She picked up her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I need to report an unlicensed vendor." She told the dispatcher, "There's a child selling drinks on the corner, no adult in sight, no business permit. I don't feel safe." The dispatcher, weary from a long shift and familiar with Karen's voice, tried to downplay the urgency. "Ma'am, it's a lemonade stand. Is there an emergency?" Karen's tone sharpened. "Are you going to wait until someone gets sick? It's a violation. Do your job." 10 minutes later, a patrol car rolled into the neighborhood, quiet but with its lights flashing. The officer, a tall man in mirrored shades, approached the stand. Aaliyah's hand stopped mid-pour. Her heart thumped as the shadow of the uniform fell over her. "Excuse me, miss," the officer said gently. "Someone reported your stand. You technically need a permit to sell drinks in public." The words stung like a slap. Aaliyah blinked up at him. "But it's just lemonade. I'm trying to help my mom." He didn't respond. just knelt beside her and waited for an adult. Inside their apartment, Tasha had no idea her daughter was being questioned by police. That is, until she heard the knock on the door and stepped outside to find flashing lights, a crowd forming, and her daughter standing frozen, clutching a cup of lemonade with trembling fingers. The world paused. The shame, the rage, the disbelief, all of it boiled in Tasha's chest as she stormed down the steps. "Who called the cops on my child?" she demanded. The officer hesitated and nodded toward the house across the street. Behind the curtain, Karen stood watching, unapologetic, smug. What she didn't know was that across the street, a teenage boy had recorded the entire encounter. From the patrol car's arrival to Aaliyah's frightened expression. He posted it online that evening with the caption, "Cops called on little girl just for selling lemonade. Share this." And the internet did more than share it. It ignited a movement. When lemonade turns into silence, Aaliyah's stand, once full of laughter and clinking cups, now stood eerily quiet. The officer looked down at her with a practiced kind of sympathy, the type worn by someone who's seen too much and says too little. He wasn't there to cause harm, but he also wasn't there to protect her dreams either. His presence alone, with his badge and calm authority, was enough to send a message: "You're not allowed here, not like this." Aaliyah tried to speak. "I didn't mean to break the rules," she whispered, holding the pitcher tightly as if it were armor. Her mother, Tasha, rushed to her side and stood between her daughter and the officer. "She's not a criminal," she said sharply, voice tight with emotion. "She's 9 years old, selling lemonade. Why is this even happening?" The officer, sensing the growing tension and the watching eyes of neighbors now peeking from porches, shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, someone called it in. I'm required to respond. Technically, food sales require a permit." Tasha didn't need to look to know who had made the call. She turned slowly and locked eyes with the curtain across the street. Karen stood half hidden, but her silhouette screamed satisfaction. The officer gave a half-hearted nod. "Just pack it up for now, please." Aaliyah's small hands moved slowly, gathering cups, dumping out her lemonade. Each drop felt like another piece of her dream slipping down the storm drain. The heat of the day seemed to press heavier on her chest now, the sun no longer bright, just blinding. She didn't cry, but the silence in her eyes was louder than tears. As the police car drove away and the crowd slowly dispersed, the street felt different. What had been a celebration of hope had been shut down by bureaucracy and fear. What had been a simple childhood dream was treated like a threat. But what no one knew, not the officer, not even Karen, was that a storm had been born, not in the clouds above, but in the hearts of those who watched. When the internet tasted injustice, the video wasn't meant to go viral. 16-year-old Jalen Brooks had filmed it out of instinct. From his porch across the street, he'd seen Aaliyah's smile fade the moment the cop stepped out of the cruiser. He didn't know her well, just that she was a sweet kid who always offered free lemonade to the mailman and complimented his grandma's earrings every time she passed by. Jalen uploaded the clip to TikTok with a simple caption. "Karen called the cops on a little girl selling lemonade. This ain't right." He didn't expect more than a few dozen views, but within hours the video exploded. By midnight, it had been reshared by activists, educators, and even a few celebrities. Hashtags like #LetHerPour, #LemonadeJustice, and #BlackGirlJoy began trending. People were angry, not just because of what happened, but because of how familiar it felt. A little black girl punished for being visible, for daring to take up space, for selling a cup of lemonade. Journalists picked up the story the next morning. Local news vans pulled up outside the Monroe apartment, and interviews flooded in. Aaliyah, shy but articulate, sat on her porch beside her mother, answering questions with the same honesty that made her lemonade so refreshing. "I just wanted to help my mom," she said on live television. I didn't know that could make somebody call the police. That single sentence turned hearts to fire. GoFundMe campaigns launched within hours. One raised over $25,000 by the second day. People from across the country donated not just money but supplies, lemons, sugar, marketing materials, even offers for free legal help to fight back against any citations. Bakeries reached out offering partnerships. A local black-owned food truck company offered mentorship. A prominent entrepreneur tweeted, "Give this girl a license, a loan, and a lemon empire. We'll back her all the way." Tasha, overwhelmed, tried to keep up with the messages. She had never seen this kind of support in her life. It was as if people were not just standing behind her and Aaliyah. They were pushing them forward. But amidst the wave of love came something else too, a new clarity. This wasn't just about lemonade anymore. It was about how quickly joy can be criminalized. It was about how systems too often swat down black excellence before it takes root. It was about reclaiming space. And Aaliyah, who had once poured lemonade into paper cups with shaking hands, was now being handed an entirely new recipe, one for justice, for ownership, for change. The world had tried to silence her with rules and regulations. Instead, it handed her a microphone. From hashtags to hope by the third day, Aaliyah's name wasn't just on the lips of her neighbors. It was on news tickers, podcast intros, and even morning show scripts across the country. Talk show hosts debated the permit issue, but most people saw it for what it was, another moment where innocence met systemic injustice. And this time, the world had cameras rolling. The viral hashtags #LetHerPour, #Justice for Aaliyah, #When Karen Called were more than trends. They were battle cries. Strangers began showing up at the Monroe home, not out of curiosity, but with purpose. One man dropped off a stack of brand, new lemonade dispensers. A woman donated a professional, grade juicer. Even a well-known children's author messaged to say she was writing a book loosely inspired by Aaliyah's courage. Then came the GoFundMe, which Tasha hadn't started, but was moved to tears when she saw it. It was organized by Jalen's mom, who captioned it simply, "Let's give this little girl and her mama the business Karen never wanted them to have." Within 48 hours, it surpassed $50,000. People gave because they believed in Aaliyah's dream, but more than that, they wanted to correct a wrong. It wasn't just about lemonade anymore. It was about restoring dignity, amplifying black voices, and giving young dreamers the wings they were always meant to have. With the donations pouring in, a community of support grew. Graphic designers offered to make her a logo. A branding coach offered free consulting. Someone even donated a lemonade cart on wheels with Aaliyah's gold hand, painted across the side in shining yellow letters. Even kids wrote in. One letter, scrawled in crayon, read, "I'm 8'2", you're my hero. When I grow up, I wanna be like you, not scared, just brave." And just like that, Aaliyah wasn't a girl who lost her lemonade stand anymore. She was a movement. The recipe for a legacy begins. They started small, just as they had the first time, but this time it was different. This time, Aaliyah and her mom weren't alone. Using the GoFundMe money, they bought a used lemonade trailer from a woman 2 towns over. It was dented and dusty, but it had wheels and a working freezer. Tasha cried the first time she turned on the generator and saw the inside light flicker on. It felt like the heartbeat of a second chance. They spent late nights customizing the menu. Peach mint lemonade, strawberry basil sparkler, and their signature flavor, gold lemonade. A mix of turmeric, honey, and fresh lemon that tasted like sunshine wrapped in victory. Tasha also introduced her own line of baked goods to pair with the drinks. Banana pudding cookies, red velvet mini cakes, and a cornbread muffin that made customers close their eyes and hum after the first bite. They named the business Aaliyah's Gold. It was more than a name. It was a statement that no one could devalue their dreams, that what was once dismissed as a child's play now stood as a polished, professional, proudly black-owned brand. Soon, farmers' markets started calling. Schools asked if she would speak to students about entrepreneurship. An Atlanta-based food magazine featured her in an article titled "From Shutdown to Show Up." the girl who made lemonade out of a lemon law. But behind the growth and glamour, there was still the heart of the story. A little girl and her mother, pouring love into every cup, every cookie, every handshake. Aaliyah handled customers like a pro. She wore a yellow apron and always greeted people with, "Welcome to Aaliyah's Gold. Would you like to try our story in a cup?" It became her catchphrase, and people loved it because that's what it was. Every sip carried a story of injustice, of courage, of community, of how a Karen tried to shut down a child, but instead lit a fire that turned into a flame the whole world could see. And though Karen never apologized, never knocked on their door or admitted what she diddle, Tia didn't need her to, because her story had already left the sidewalk and stepped onto a much bigger stage. One cup of lemonade at a time, the rise of Aaliyah's Gold. The lemonade cart had wheels, but the dream had wings. What began as a local buzz quickly turned into a regional phenomenon. With every passing weekend, Aaliyah's Gold drew longer lines. From the young to the elderly, customers showed up not just for lemonade, but for what it represented: resilience, pride, and possibility. By the time Aaliyah turned 11, her product had been featured in Essence, Bet News, and even a short segment on Good Morning America. Orders for bottled lemonade flooded in from every state. Aaliyah had to learn logistics just to keep up, calculating shipping costs, managing labels, balancing profit margins with generosity, but she wasn't alone. Tasha managed the baking arm of the business while mentoring other single mothers looking to launch food startups. Together, mother and daughter became more than just business owners. They became symbols of what Black excellence looked like when nurtured instead of denied. They applied for and won a local small business grant, which allowed them to scale production. A local beverage distributor offered a deal. With the help of branding consultants who had volunteered after the viral video, they created sleek, glass-bottled versions of their signature drinks. The name Aaliyah's Gold now sat on the shelves of boutique grocery stores and cafes. The peach, mint flavor became a southern favorite, while their Justice lemonade, a bold hibiscus, lavender mix, sold out online in under 24 hours. Then came the merch: t-shirts, tote bags, hoodies with slogans like "Let her pour," "Fresh squeezed, never silenced," "This gold don't tarnish." Aaliyah was now more than a founder. She was a youth CEO, a speaker, a role model. At a TEDx youth event, she stood before a packed room and said, "When someone tries to stop you from being seen, don't shrink, shine harder." It was the kind of moment that made people stand and cheer. And they did. But while the spotlight grew, Aaliyah never forgot the sidewalk where it all began. She kept that original sign, 25 Lemonade, pinned inside their production studio, a reminder, a promise. One cup, one dream, and now one empire on the rise, back to where it all began 10 years past, and on a warm Saturday afternoon, a sleek black SUV pulled into the same quiet suburb of East Maple Lane. People peeked from their porches, but this time it wasn't suspicion in their eyes, it was awe. Out stepped Aaliyah Monroe, now 19 years old, poised in a golden blazer, with natural curls cascading over her shoulders and confidence in every step. She had returned not just as a success story, but as a visionary. This was the grand opening of Aaliyah's Gold Cafe, her first brick-and mortar location, built right in the same neighborhood where she was once shut down for selling lemonade. The cafe was a vibrant, airy space with walls adorned in murals of young black girls dreaming big. One side was dedicated to entrepreneurship resources, a library of books, a wall of scholarships, and even a free mentorship sign-up kiosk. The other side was all flavor: cupcake counters, lemonade stations, and a custom tea bar named Tasha's Table, in honor of her mother. But the twist, the poetic full-circle moment, came at the press conference. Standing on a small stage outside the cafe, in front of news crews, community members, and former customers, Aaliyah made her final announcement. "Today, I'm proud to share that our company has officially purchased the old HOA building across the street. The same one that once stood behind the woman who called the police on me when I was 9. Gasps echoed, applause erupted, and we're turning it into a community business incubator for young entrepreneurs who have been told you can't before they even try." Across the street, behind now faded curtains, Karen Whitmore was still there, older, bitter, and forgotten by a world that had moved on without her. Aaliyah didn't even glance her way, because this moment wasn't about Karen. It never had been. It was about what happens when a dream refuses to die, when it adapts, when it grows, when it owns the very ground that once tried to bury it. And as the ribbon was cut and the cafe doors opened, a long line of people walked in, not for the lemonade, but for the legacy. And in the corner of the cafe, placed in a gold frame under soft spotlight, sat a weathered cardboard sign, 25 lemonade, because before there were headlines, before the hashtags. There was just a little black girl, a jug of lemonade, and a dream bigger than any law, rule, or curtain could ever contain. Ownership is the real clapback. The purchase of the old HOA building wasn't just a business move, it was a statement. That two-story brick structure had once represented control, exclusion, and quiet suppression. For years, Karen Whitmore and her circle had used it as a tool to police lawns, police children, and police dreams. But now its keys belong to Aaliyah Monroe, the same little girl they tried to silence with a 911 call. The building was renamed the Gold House. Where policy once excluded, it now welcomed. Inside, the walls were painted bright yellow with inspirational quotes from black entrepreneurs, poets, and artists. Each office was equipped with resources for young creators, podcasting rooms, laptop stations, and a legal help desk staffed weekly by volunteer lawyers. A banner at the entrance read, "This space belongs to the dreamers they tried to deny." When the ribbon was cut, Aaliyah stood tall at the podium, addressing a crowd that stretched into the street. News crews filmed. Former critics watched in silence. Her voice was calm but piercing. "They told me I didn't belong. They said I needed a permit to pour lemonade, so I got one. Then I got a business. Then I got a brand, and now I got the building." The applause shook the trees. Aaliyah had learned a lesson early. Power doesn't beg for permission. It builds its own table. She didn't need revenge. She built a legacy instead, and the greatest irony, Karen now lived across the street from a thriving business hub led by the very girl she once called the cops on. Some neighbors say Karen rarely left the house anymore. Her porch light, once lit like a lighthouse for neighborhood complaints, stayed off most evenings. Occasionally, she peeked through her curtains, watching people of every age and background walk into the Gold House, inspired and empowered. She had tried to erase Aaliyah. Instead, she became a footnote in her legend. The lemonade that never spoiled late one evening after the grand opening buzz had quieted and the last cupcake was boxed. Aaliyah returned to the cafe alone. The doors were locked, the staff had gone home, but the space still buzzed with energy. The scent of vanilla, fresh citrus, and success lingering in the air. She walked behind the counter and opened a drawer beneath the register. Inside, wrapped in a protective sleeve, was the old lemonade sign, 25 lemonade. Its corners were frayed, the marker ink faded, but to her it was priceless. She gently placed it back on the wall near the entrance, right beside a polished plaque that read, "Founded here, fought for everywhere." Her eyes welled with tears, not of sadness but of fullness. She thought back to that hot summer afternoon, the fear of the police cruiser, the shame of being told you can't. How that moment cracked something open inside her and let the sunlight in. Aaliyah turned and looked out the cafe window. Across the street, the house was dark, curtains drawn, but that no longer mattered, because outside her cafe, a new little girl was setting up her own lemonade stand. Aaliyah smiled wide and stepped out into the evening air. "Hey," she called, walking over, "want a few tips on how to make it really sparkle?" The girl nodded, starstruck. Aaliyah leaned down and whispered, "Don't let anyone tell you your dream is too small. Mine started right here, with one picture, a paper sign, and a whole lot of heart." And just like that, the legacy poured forward. One cup at a time, one generation to the next, because some lemonade doesn't spoil. It sweetens with time. The sip that changed everything from a paper sign to a national brand. From a sidewalk stand to a community empire, Aaliyah Monroe's story reminds us that dreams don't require permission to exist. They only need space, courage, and someone bold enough to believe they matter. What began with a 911 call meant to erase her presence turned into a call to action for millions. Aaliyah didn't just survive the moment, she transformed it. She turned her silence into strategy, her tears into triumph. Her lemonade stand into a legacy, and now as she pours knowledge into the next generation, as she rebuilds on the very ground that once tried to push her away, she shows the world what true power looks like. It looks like gold, it tastes like justice, and it all started with one little girl and one cup of lemonade.